Okay.
Oh, thank you very much, Stephanie. I loved your talk because it's so pertinent to what we're doing with our cranes. And I know you're sort of a craniac too. So I look forward to talking to you more about that. These are our two species of cranes in North America, the sandhill crane and the whooping crane. The sandhill is the most abundant crane on Earth with more than 1 million birds. The whooping crane is the rarest, with less than 1,000, including captive, experimental, and the old population, which is up to 500. Sandhills are successful. They paint their feathers with mud and hide on their nests in small wetlands sometimes. Whoopers are bright white, inhabit larger marshes, are easily seen by terrestrial predators, want to be way out in the water, and their dependence on vast expanses of wetland habitat has been the problem as such areas have been drained. The cranes build a platform nest. They pull up the vegetation into a heap. They can see predators that may be coming close to the nest. And from the air, they're so obvious to other whooping cranes, and maybe this helps in their territoriality. That's the traditional range of the whooping crane. As you can see, it covers the Epiquan area of Illinois. These huge wetlands, most of which were drained, on the tallgrass prairie provided the optimum habitat for those birds in the north, and in the south, a non-migratory flock from Louisiana into Texas, the same type of habitat, the tall grassland prairie. The blue areas are where they wintered. Those areas were destroyed and the birds were shot for food by the pioneers, but one little population survived way up in northern Canada that migrated to Texas. And that's the flock that was reduced to just 15 birds in 1941, but has increased to about 500. But now we have a second flock that we have helped establish since 2001 that migrates between Wisconsin and the southeast. And that's the population I'm going to be speaking about today. We are very grateful to our Native American populations. It's a tragedy what happened to their culture and their lands, but it's time for restoration. The Crane clan, these are likely sandhill cranes in northern Wisconsin, were the leaders of several different groups, each of which carried the name of a totem animal. Their cultures were severely impacted when Europeans poured into the Great Plains. But imagine you're with your kids in a covered wagon heading out into the unknown. No stores, a large bird, a large mammal is a meal. The wildlife on the Great Plains was absolutely obliterated. And in 1922, the last whooping crane was shot in Saskatchewan. But fortunately, in this wilderness area called Wood Buffalo National Park, the whooping cranes found sanctuary. Nesting on these ponds in a vast complex, the birds lay their eggs in mid-May. Both cranes assist in incubation, and they rear their chicks in that solitude, which was not discovered until 1954. And they migrate. This is the migration of a single crane, and the little white dots indicate where it stopped overnight. You can see they can cover great distances in a single flight. And they travel in small groups, resting at night at prairie ponds and staging actually in southern Saskatchewan, where they build up their fat reserves before the big push to Texas. And along the coast of Texas, particularly near Corpus Christi, in a place called the Aransas National Wildlife Refuge, the whooping cranes find their sanctuary in the winter. This is where I work. This is the headquarters of the International Crane Foundation near Baraboo, Wisconsin. This organization was founded in 1973 From a different angle, you can look down and see Crane City with 4 streets and 61 crane dominiums. They're separated from the public area of the International Crane Foundation by restored prairie. And in Crane City, this is where we keep captive whooping cranes and cranes from other endangered species from around the world. They are in large enclosures with artificial wetlands. We allow some of the cranes to rear their own chicks for release into the wild. Others are hatched in incubators. We used costumed people to rear the cranes so they're imprinted. They learn to associate with their own species. And upon flying, the young cranes stay with their parents for about 8 to 9 months. So they want to follow the costume keepers. And since 2001 through 2015, we're very grateful to an organization from Canada called Operation Migration, with the pilot wearing the crane costume and leading these captive reared cranes south to winter in Florida. We took them to Florida to areas that had good wetlands, and we thought that we will have a new migratory flock to Florida. They came back on their own in the spring and have nested, paired up very well, and nested mainly at Necedah National Wildlife Refuge in central Wisconsin, which was our release area. Our first chicks hatched in the wild in 2006, and here's the same family in Florida. One of the young birds was lost just at fledging from predation from an eagle. But we found in central Wisconsin a huge problem with black flies. They hatch in late April on the first warm day, and they swarm the crane nests. The crane will sit down on these eggs, and they have a bare brood patch against the egg. And of course, the black flies attack for blood and drive the cranes from their nests. So we collect the first clutch of eggs after about 10 days and get the birds to recycle, and they nest after the peak of the black flies. So this complicated graph prepared by our wonderful whooping crane researcher, Hillary Thompson, shows the progress of this population since 2001. The released birds in light color, the dark ones, long-term missing or confirmed mortalities, and the yellow are birds produced in the wild. And you can see that eventually they're doing a little bit better. The population has declined since 2015 because we're no longer doing the ultralight migrations. We're simply releasing the captive reared birds with the wild cranes. So we don't have that huge input from captivity. And in 2020, because of the pandemic, of course, we couldn't do our field research. The breeding cranes are as in circles in this diagram, and the non-breeding cranes as little triangles. So most of the birds are coming back to this central area in Wisconsin. But something very interesting, in the early years between 2010 and 2018, you can see a lot of the birds wintered in Florida. But subsequently, they've shifted north, as is also happening with sandhill cranes and many other birds, perhaps in response to climate change. And now we have a lot of birds wintering in northern Alabama at the Wheeler National Wildlife Refuge, and in southwestern Indiana in neighboring areas of Illinois, particularly the Goose Pond State Wildlife Area in Indiana. We have a family of cranes wintering on Kaskaskia Island in western Illinois, just south of St. Louis. And we have a bunch of birds wintering in Kentucky and some further north. So our whooping cranes are migrating across Illinois, and I hope at some time, if the population can expand from Wisconsin, that they'll come to breed in Illinois. And that would be a wonderful thing if they came to your area. Recently, I have been able to get to know people in Illinois, particularly with the Wetland Initiative. And this is Sue Dixon at the Dixon Wetland along the Illinois River, a huge complex into which at least 3 pairs of sandhill cranes have moved in recent years and are breeding. And a group of us in Illinois have been getting together to talk about learning more about the sandhill cranes and some of the things that Stephanie studied. What effects are these water levels having on the sandhill crane productivity? And this area may ultimately be much better habitat than Wisconsin because it's the core breeding range of the former populations of the tallgrass prairie. This year, I was able to visit these 2 areas where some of our whooping cranes have been stopping. So I'm getting to know, and my colleagues here at the Crane Foundation are getting to know you people down in Illinois more and more, and we look forward to future cooperation. As the sandhill cranes are moving in, as the whooping cranes are flying over, and we hope as the whooping cranes stop to breed at some point in Illinois. Thank you very much.